Hello everyone, welcome to the Prussian language, the new video here on the MOPC Linguistics Channel. This is another one of my series on every language in the world. Please subscribe to my channel, activate the bell notifications, because on this channel you're going to see descriptions, deep, thorough descriptions of pretty much every language that is possible to be described in the world. And we're now going to do one language that is one of the, I'd say, hardest to research, at least among languages that were supposed to be relatively easy. I'm talking about an European language, a European language that was spoken until the 1700s. But there is scarcely any information about this other than a small catechism. There is a book that was made to Christianize the Prussians during the Lutheran Reformation in the 1500s. That's pretty much the only extensive literary work we have to access and know what the Prussian language was like. The Prussian language, I'm talking about the Old Prussian language. Prussia, as you may know, is usually associated with the Prussian state. There was a German state created exactly on top of the Old Prussian ethnic group, the linguistic group, after it was conquered by the Teutonic Knights during the medieval Baltic Crusades. The Baltic tribes, like the Lithuanians and the Latvians, the ancient Latvians and so on, and the Prussians and other tribes from that region, refused to convert to Christianity. So in the 1200s, the Catholic Church, there were no Protestants yet, the Catholic Church sent a crusade to just shove Christianity down their throats by force. So the Teutonic Knights, who were their immediate neighbors to the west, invaded much of the Baltic lands, including Prussia, and became the overlords of the Prussians forever, until pretty much Second World War, when what is now Prussia became part of Poland and Russia. Those parts ceased to be German. But until 1945, those regions, Prussia became a Germanic state, and the Prussian language was oppressed, reduced to a minority. The Prussian people learned German. I don't know if then many people, I don't think many people were killed, literally. I think that the Prussians were indeed linguistically absorbed by the Germans, learned German, became Germans, and the Prussian language itself became extinct in around 1720, 1740, sometime in the first half of the 18th century. So let's take a look at some of the maps here. Before we continue, you can also access my multilingual dictionary, which is a thematic, semantically arranged dictionary on many languages. You can learn the vocabulary of many languages in parallel, like parts of the body, family members, names of animals and trees, and countless verbs and adjectives. Everything organized in a very intuitive and intelligent way, not in a normal dictionary, which is alphabetical order. I'm talking about an intuitively arranged multilingual dictionary that I have available. There's a link below. Take a look at the links below under the video. So here we have the map of the Baltic tribes roughly in the 1200s, roughly around the year 1200, shortly before the Crusades. We have the Prussians were the westernmost of the Baltic tribes. Okay, the Baltic tribes are not Slavic. They are not exactly the same thing as the Poles and the Russians and the Croatians and the Czechs. Those are the Slavs, the Slavic ethnicities which were neighbors to the Baltics. The Baltic tribes live along the coast of the Baltic Sea, and the Slavs lived a little bit further to the south, where is now Poland and Slovakia. And the Slavic languages are overall a little bit closer to the Baltic languages than they are to other languages. So the Baltic and the Slavic languages, maybe because of their extensive coexistence until medieval times, they are closer to each other on average. Okay, not as close as some people think, but they are pretty close in many regards. We have the Lithuanians. The Lithuanian is today still considered the most archaic, the most conservative of all Indo-European languages. So Lithuanian preserves features that were lost pretty much 2,000 years ago. There are features that we can see in Latin, we can see in ancient Greek, especially in the noun declension. Prussian is a different branch of the Baltic languages, quite different from Lithuanian and Latvian, which are Eastern Baltic languages. But Prussian was a little bit more conservative in a few elements, but so far as we know, we don't know everything about the language. We have only a fragment of the language. Its declension was simpler. It only had 4 cases in the declension: nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. So all the post-dative cases were coalesced, were joined into one big dative case that included the old instrumental and locative and ablative cases that were typical of old Indo-European languages. These cases, largely with the exception of the ablative, still exist in Lithuanian and Latvian. And Prussian also retained the neuter gender. Lithuanian and Latvian are, even though they are quite conservative, they have lost the neutral gender. Most neutral nouns, I believe, they merged with the masculine nouns, just like Latin languages did. But in Prussian, still have a masculine, a feminine, and a neutral genders separately, and the adjective agrees with them all. It's although the verbal paradigm, as you can expect from Baltic languages, just like Slavic and Germanic language, the verbal paradigm is quite simplified relative to ancient Indo-European. It only has like one present, one past, and a few composite tenses. We're going to take a look at that. So what is now left of Prussia is the exclave of Kaliningrad. This little chunk that you can see kind of lost in the middle of Eastern European maps. There's this blank spot, this lost, isolated non-country that is actually directly administered, managed by Russia. Since World War II, when Russia invaded all of Eastern Europe to defeat Nazi Germany, they took a hold of most of what was then Eastern Prussia, the province of Königsberg in Prussia. And this chunk of Eastern Prussia became a strategic point for Russia to access the southernmost point of the Baltic Ocean, and therefore have access to its western outposts, Poland, East Germany, and the Western world, and the Atlantic Ocean, because the northern seas, of course, where St. Petersburg is, the Russian exit to the Baltic Sea is a little bit frozen, it's too cold. So having Kaliningrad is still, during the Cold War, Kaliningrad was off limits to any foreigners. You need to have a special authorization from the government. Almost no foreigner visited the Kaliningrad province of Russia, the Kaliningrad Oblast of Russia, during the Cold War. Today, many Germans go there because that's the land where their grandparents used to live. And even some older people, actually, some older Germans who were deported to the rest of Germany, the other parts, the surviving parts of Germany, they spent sometimes their childhoods there. Some very old people nowadays, but after the Cold War ended in the 90s, many people went back to see their old city of Kaliningrad, which is now of Königsberg, which is now Kaliningrad. And the western parts of Prussia were fully incorporated into Poland. They're fully incorporated into Poland. They're now part of Polish territory. So Prussia became, as I said, after the Crusades, the Germans became the overlords of the Prussians, and Prussia became essentially a German territory, a German kingdom, which in the 1870s, 1871, after the French-Prussian War, Prussia took the war as an excuse to unify all the German lands other than Switzerland and Austria, and the Netherlands, of course, all the Central European Germanic peoples, which were then still separated into the Prussia and Northern German Alliance, which included the former Hanseatic League, parts of Hamburg, and the Palatinate area of the Rhine Confederacy, where Frankfurt is. Those Protestant parts in the north were already associated with Germany. But Bavaria and Swabia and Austria were Catholic, and Prussia was afraid that those Catholic regions would join with Austria, which was already a huge empire in Central Europe, controlled much of the Slavic territories of Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Croatia, Transylvania. So Prussia in 1871 unified the southern Catholic regions of Bavaria and Swabia, but not Austria, of course. Yeah, Austria was its own thing, its own empire. Only Hitler in 1933 37 would actually finally join Austria with Germany and create one single German nation, but that wouldn't last too much, and that wasn't a very healthy experience. But then Russia became Germany, and then Prussia became Germany. I'm sorry, Prussia became Germany, and the rest is history. But let's go back to the language. So what was this old Baltic, old relative to Lithuanian and Latvian? What was it like then? What were its main features? So in this catechism that we have of Prussian, other than this catechism, we have only a few like word lists and a few small text samples of Prussian. We can see elements such as the Ten Commandments. So we can see in the Ten Commandments the ordinal numbers, first, second, not only the Ten Commandments themselves. Funnily enough, the word for you in ancient Prussia was spelled just like the old. They had no spelling in Russian. Prussian had no. If I say Russian, I'm saying Prussian here. Okay, Prussian had no standard spelling. Prussian was never a written language. The Prussian people never wrote. The literary language of the Prussians was always German. That's why they shifted to speaking German altogether. So this catechism had like a German-inspired spelling that spelled the word for you, which was probably tu or toe, spelled like Old English thou, but that's a coincidence, has nothing to do, not that there's only an indirect relationship, of course, because Prussian and English are both Indo-European languages that have similar pronoun systems derived from a common ancestor. But funny enough, the second person pronoun thou, just like English, is spelled like the English thou, but it's pronounced probably toe. So we have like pirmas, which is first, right? Pirmas is like protos or primus in Latin, or even first. I don't know if first in English is related to that, because first comes from before, like for, the foremost. But yeah, related to Lithuanian pirmas, pirmus or pirmus anters, which is related to like the other, related to outer, other, yeah, meaning second. Some languages conflate the meanings of other and second. Swedish does that. So Swedish under, annan, andra means both another and the second. The Baltic languages do that as well. So tirts, third, ketwerts, which is very almost Proto-Indo-European for fourth, penctis, and then wuscht. That's different. There's no initial S. The initial S was lost. The word for six in Prussian was probably ushi. I'm going to show you the numbers in Prussian as we reconstructed them a little bit later. Okay, stand by, because we're going to see the numbers, the ordinal and the cardinal numbers side by side compared to Lithuanian, Latvian, and Polish later. Septmas, okay, seventh, and Asmus, eighth, and Nevins, ninth, as well as decimt, which is 10th. Very, very clearly an Indo-European paradigm. Here we see the evolutionary tree. Before we move on, let's understand the evolutionary tree of Baltic within Indo-European. Baltic is one of the offshoots of Proto-Indo-European. We're going to have to wait for my video on Proto-Indo-European on the channel, but I'm going to show you everything about the Indo-European family, show all the hidden relationships between words that exist in apparently completely different languages. But here, Baltic, you see, as Baltic is closer to Slavic in general, and within Baltic there was a western branch, which is completely extinct by now, which included Prussian and a few other languages whose existence we only know by name. There's hardly any information about what they were actually like. Only Prussian is a little bit more known. We have the catechism. And the eastern branch, which includes Latvian, Lithuanian, they are the two big modern Baltic survivors, and also Latgalian or Latgalic language, that's surviving minority language spoken in Latvia that was until recently considered like a dialect of Latvian, but I believe linguistically it's actually a separate language. So there are three surviving Baltic languages. They're all from the eastern branch. The other, like Curonian and Semigalian, bye-bye. Okay, they're gone. Here we take a look at the consonantal system of Prussian, if you want to take a look into phonetics a little. That's a reconstructed phonetic. We don't have actual audio samples from them, but linguists are able to reconstruct a consonantal system in phonetic alphabet that shows something that is quite similar to Slavic and Baltic. A lot of plain and palatal consonants like na and nya, pa and pya, ta and cha, ja and zya, da and dya. All of these J's put after the consonants mean that they had a short like Y sound. Pya, 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 mya, nya, rya, lya. So that's a very typically Slavic and Baltic feature. Here we see the comparison between the verb to be in the present and past in Lithuanian, Latvian, and Prussian. You can see that Prussian is a little bit more conservative. It just looks a little bit more like Sanskrit. I don't know if you guys know Sanskrit, but you will know about it because I'll make a fantastic video about it here on the channel. But yeah, the Sanskrit, the Prussian paradigm in the present looks a lot like ancient European languages. Even the third person is ast. And you can also see a feature that was typical of all Baltic languages. There was no distinction between the verbs in the third person singular and plural. There was no separate third person plural. All third persons were distinct of number. So like I said, ast is he is or they are, and ast is also for they are. There's no distinction there. The pronouns are distinct, of course, but the verbs, no verbs, not a verb to be or any verb in the language distinguishes between third person singular or plural. When you consider the past stem in those languages is made of the same stem that we have in English, the verb to be. The be, which in Latin is the stem that gives also the past, the perfect in Latin languages, fuit. Foi, the fui, foi, that we find in Italian, in Portuguese, in Romanian, in Spanish, and in a few other Latin languages. That be, bu form was, because in the European there were two verbs to be, at least, maybe more. One which was the source of the present conjugation, asma, ase, ast. And another one which was but, that was the source of the verb to be in English and the past form in many Indo-European languages today, including Slavic. There is also bit and bull. Here we see conjugation pattern in Lithuanian, Latvian, and Prussian. You consider Prussian, it's a partly reconstructed form of Prussian. We don't know everything about it, but some verbs appear to be identical in the present and in the past, and most verbs seem to be identical also in all of the singular persons. So I don't know exactly if that's a failure in the reconstruction or the future was, as you can see down below, the future was created by using this wirst. Nothing to do with German. Looks like German, but it's not the wirst of the future in the wirst in German. But it's the wirst is like the verb to become. Okay, it can be used also as the future of the verb to be in Prussian. Plus the past participle. So the future was not an auxiliary with the infinitive, but an auxiliary with the past participle. So technically, wirst delavunds is like I will be worked. It's the past participle there. And the past participle is to agree with the subject of the verb. So you can, wirst delavund was the masculine form, but wirst delavuni, or delavusi, if I'm not mistaken, was the feminine form. So that would change according to the subject. So the past participle would agree with the subject, which is something that actually happens in Slavic, right? The past form of verbs, which is in L in the Slavic languages, is like a former active past participle that still agrees with the subject as well. So it may be a convergent parallel evolution, even though it's not the same thing. It still reminds me of the paradigm that we see in Slavic, which we do not see in Lithuanian and Latvian. In Lithuanian and Latvian, they have their own future with S. The S future that we see in Greek, that we see in Sanskrit, that we see in certain Latin verbs, archaic formation, some archaic leftovers from in archaic Latin. The future is formed with the suffix S. So dirbsiu, dirbsi is he will work. Dirbi Dirba is he works. Dirbsi is he will work. Not all verbs are identical, at least in the reconstructed, I don't know, the partly fictitious Prussian that some websites present. But the verb to know, weißt du, is different in the present and the present and in the past. You can say vida and vidai, and the perfect is also made with a auxiliary. So the perfect I have known is ast viduns, which is known. It looks like a passive, but it's a perfect. To be worked is to have worked. That's something that even Slavic languages don't do, or do they? But that's it. That's a paradigm in Prussian, as far as I could ascertain. And this is the nominal declension, noun and adjective, the noun phrase. The noun phrase in Prussian was determiner first, adjective second, noun last. So we have lab tavs, good father, and we have labagena, which is a good woman or a good wife. The paradigm is much within what we'd expect from a moderately conservative Indo-European language. There is, as I said, nominative, accusative, genitive, and dative. It looks pretty much like the declension that we see in German, in Greek, in Latin, in Slavic, in Aryan as well. There is an accusative which is marked by a nasal, very Indo-European. The accusative plural is marked by an elongated nasal with an S, or nasal with a long vowel, which is the genitive is marked by an S, very Indo-European. English still does it. We still have it. The apostrophe S, the genitive, the Saxon genitive. The genitive plural is made by an N, just like in Greek, in Sanskrit partly. The neutral, we have their masculine and feminine declensions, but the neutral declension was pretty much like the masculine. Just like in any Indo-European language, the neutral declension is just like the masculine, except that the nominative is just like the masculine accusative. And the dative is a little bit more elongated because it's like survival of a lot of old cases that were coalesced in Prussian into one case. If you study Lithuanian and Latvian and even the Slavic languages, you're going to see what those cases were like originally, probably in Prussian, where Prussian doesn't have them anymore. The locative case and the instrumental case are still present in the other Baltic languages. The personal pronouns declined here. As, tu meant I, you. Mes and yous was we and you plural. And the last line is the third person reflective. Self, himself. He saw himself. This is his own. You can say the dative forms are very Indo-European. So many is like the mi in Latin, and tebe is like tibi in Latin, or tibia, tibie in Russian. Sebe is a sebia, or sibi, sebia in Russian, sibi in Latin. And here, just like I promised, the noun, the numbers. Take a good look at the table, because it's reconstructed. The numbers in italic are reconstructed in reconstructed Prussian. Some of the reconstructed forms had a yai in the end, like from 7 through 9. The reconstructed form had an additional suffix which are removed because it doesn't look like a natural thing. Nobody will say septini yai. I don't think it was pronounced, so I took it off. Septini, astuni, nervini, decimts. Yeah, so there's 100 and 1,000 and as well below. And for comparison, Lithuanian, Latvian, and a Slavic language, Polish, right there, with the ordinal numbers in parentheses. You can freeze the video here if you want to take a deeper look. A few sentences in Prussian. Asma jau seguiun stan. Technically it means I am already done that. I am done means I have done. So I have already done that. Asma jau seguiuns stan. Seguivuns stan. I think the W is pronounced like a V, right? Jau asma pergubusi. So in this case, we have a feminine. Pergubusi is a feminine, not pergubuns, but pergubusi. Pergubusi is the feminine past participle. It means a woman saying, I have already arrived. She's saying, I am already arrived. And pergubuns, which would be the masculine past participle, is there replaced with a feminine singular, pergubusi. Here's the conjugation of the verb lauktue. As I said, the present forms are all identical. But in the plural, we have laukimai, laukite, and then the third person plural is just like the singular. Here is the verb imtue, cognate with Lithuanian imti. It's a verb to take. There is no, as far as you know, there is no cognate of the verb bera, the old European verb which is to bear in English. But there is ima, which is to take, right there. You can see there, ima, imima, imite, ima. Asma, here's the verb to be again, but with the pronouns, if you want to see it with the subject pronouns. Diritue is a verb to look at, also conjugated at dire, mai, direte. A few prepositional sentences. Senti, with you. Sentin, with you. Prei mergan, next to the girl. Ezemin, about me. Persunin, for the dog. Evisasidin, after Tuesday. Nasalin, on the island. Pabrokastan, after breakfast. And pas sunin is following the dog. As wirst buuns and butu. That means I will be home. I will be in the house. As wirst buuns and butu. As wirst, I will be. Buuns is the past participle of the verb to be, which would literally be rendered as I become being in home, in house. Butan is house, if I'm not mistaken. So en butu is in the house. And okay, so have any questions? If you have any further questions, or if you have any corrections and further information to add to the video, please do it in the comments section. And if you wanna have me as your personal teacher, I can teach German, I can teach Russian, I can teach English, I can teach Swedish and a few Latin languages as well. You contact me through my email, and I can teach you online using WhatsApp or Telegram or Google Meetings or whatever software you might prefer. We can arrange classes on a weekly basis and create a program to learn English or learn any language that you might like, including my own native Brazilian Portuguese, of course, which is one of my main specialties. And if you want to access my multilingual dictionary, thematic, intelligent, intuitive, super cool dictionary, you can find the link below for the short free version. And there's also a complete full version, and you can access it. You can email me to know how to access the whole shebang, the big tamale, okay? So I hope you enjoyed my Prussian video. Many other videos of very common languages and very unusual unknown languages will be here. This is every language on earth on the MOPC Languages channel. So long.